when you're in an interaction with another person, you're having that friction, you're having that grit and the cogs and the wheels and all that, you are meeting reality
Mhm.
whether you like it or not.
Yeah, often not if it's sand.
Yeah. So it seems, quote, easier or smoother or more pleasurable, maybe even to some people, to not have that friction and just get what you want. And I can get that just by going to the right porn or the right conversation with the AI or reading the right erotica. And I think that that creates a lot of problems down the line if you do wanna have a relational dynamic, because then you inherently put the other person into the position of playing the role of your fantasy.
Mhm. This is erotic reclamation.
A space where desire isn't shameful, boundaries are a turn on, and curiosity is welcome wherever it leads. I'm Nicolette.
And I'm Carrie. And we're here to have honest conversations about sex, kink, relationships, aliveness, being in a body, and all the weirdness that entails, and pleasure that heals.
Because these electrifying, liberating, ecstatic, but misunderstood parts of the human experience are too good to hide. A quick note before we dive in so you can choose how you enter this conversation. In this episode, we explore the intersection of sexuality and emerging technology, including mentions of AI, porn, fantasy, and sex work. We also reference experiences of sexual assault and touch on themes of sexual violence that may be tender for some listeners.
All right. This is going to be a fun one. We don't exactly know where we're going.
Yeah, we just know that we're inspired to talk about some things.
Exactly. I'm like, there's an Economist article about AI and porn. That has been something we've been wanting to talk about. There just seems to be there always seem to be reminders of what happens when desire is suppressed and where people go to find sexual gratification. And I'm just curious to start having the conversation around maybe we can just start with why I think a business like ours is going to stay relevant and
Mm.
become even more important as technology continues on this. I can't even use the words because I'm so not a tech person. I'm not a Luddite, which I learned that word.
Ooh.
Yeah. That's like the people who are anti technology. Maybe back in the days of like the Industrial Revolution, they used to be like, they used to destroy wool looms because they were afraid it would like take people's jobs and they were anti technology. That's a Luddite. I'm not a Luddite.
Okay.
But I am someone who's watching. I think a lot of us are. What's happening with AI? What's happening with technology? Even social media and kids' social skills. And I've seen some studies that say the younger generation now is having less sex. And we're not here to discuss good or bad, but I'd love to kind of talk about why being in the body, being able to connect with someone, being able to connect with pleasure, ask for what you want, why all of that I think is going to continue to be relevant, if not even more important as technology continues to explode.
Yeah, thank you. I find myself very squirmy. I go like I'm like, ah, like wiggling and cringing to step into the conversation and also really appreciative that we're having it.
Mm,
And I think that what's happening in my body, the nervousness, the resistance, the tension, the fear, that's an expression of a lot of what happens under the surface that isn't spoken in these kinds of conversations, like when we're talking about sex. And so, I'm naming it to say that if that's showing up for anyone who's listening, you are not alone.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I can get squirrely around just technology in the future in general.
Mhm.
Um, it's easy to, and this has been something really cool with my partner, is I see a lot of attention given to the negative aspects of technology and what could happen. And I think it's important. I think we need to be aware of what the side effects or bad implications could be, but there are also some really beautiful positive ones that we don't often think about and the news doesn't draw your eye to either.
Mm,
And so that for me has been a place when I start getting into these conversations around what the future might look like. It's like, oh, there is all of this potential bad implication, but there's also like a world of the good where, okay, on one hand, you could say AI sex bot girlfriends are going to be the norm, and it's just going to drive people farther and farther away from themselves. There's going to be a rise in an incel community, and there's going to be a rise in dissatisfied women not finding men, and men like that might deepen. But then there's also now access to podcasts like ours
mhm,
and access to the internet in a way that is positive, where you actually see more people having dialogues about how pleasure is a buy-in for sex. That wasn't taught to women back in the day.
mhm,
Like a lot, like, thank goodness we've had yeah, I'm sorry, I might just make everyone squirm. Thank goodness, like, we had the Me Too movement to, like, bring that out of the shadows, the, like, frequency that which women have lived with sexual assault, and that brought us to a really good place with consent. I now see this next evolution is like, we are now, the bar isn't just consent, it's consent and enjoyment.
mhm,
It's pleasure, it's awareness, it's teaching how to be generous with the body of another because that's care, how to be generous with your own body because that's care. And so, yes, these conversations are kind of esoteric and out in the future, but I'm hopeful that you and I putting out content like this, that people we know putting out content is actually going to influence that. That's what AI can also be learning from. Maybe they're listening to our podcast. We're going to like influence a generation of kinky, pleasure based, aliveness based, consent forward dialogues. Like I
mhm,
hope to put that into the machine as it's in its inception phase.
mhm. Well, some of the things that you were talking about brought up a few things for me. One of the things I've talked about on this podcast is the early days in chat rooms. And that technology was really important for me in empowering my sexuality in a time in which I needed a way to feel safe, and being directly in interaction with another human being wasn't making me feel safe at the time.
Mm,
I had some very fresh wounds around sexual assault, and I wanted to still be able to embrace my sexuality, but I wasn't wanting to go out, and interact with other human beings because I didn't
mm,
trust them. And so having chat rooms gave me a place to explore and experiment and play and flirt, and I could just exit out and be anonymous, and it gave me that space. And and so I see with the evolution of technology and now with porn and OnlyFans and AI, there's a certain level of anonymity that the person who's viewing or interacting with or having the AI conversation can have, and there's that distance, that separation that can feel like a level of protection, which isn't necessarily a negative thing. For me, it acted as a training wheels so that I could start to get clarity on what my desires were before I actually started to interact with people again.
Mm,
But then I did start interacting with people again with
mhm,
knowledge of my desires. So using it as training wheels for that was valuable.
mm,
But if I used it fully as a crutch or as my main source of sexuality, that might not be as effective or supportive.
mm, mm. Yeah, that's a I just find it so fascinating because it's all experiment, right? So we
Mhm.
don't know where it's gonna go, and, like, is an AI companion would it meet the same deep need as being in the room with another human? I don't think so, but and, like, will it be addictive and exactly giving someone what they want without all the friction that real relationship brings? And that's where it's like, "Oh, this could get sticky." But I have to think that at some point, potentially, either people will be very happy with that and satisfied, but there will if they miss connection with another, then that's again where that's where this work, that's where relational sexuality will come into play. We talk a lot about solo sexuality because I don't ever want anybody to feel like you have to have another to be a sexual being. And so we
Mhm.
emphasize that a lot. But I also think it is deeply important to have access to your relational sexuality. And that's confronting. That has the ability to lean in with conflict. That has some grit in the wheels. That has things that I think make it inherently challenging, but also more satisfying than if you're going and every single time your partner just gives you exactly what you want. I don't know. Would you get a degree of boredom?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the person. Some people love that consistency.
Mm-hmm.
The crux for me is around fantasy.
Mm,
Like, what is fantasy and what is reality? When you're in an interaction with another person and you're having that friction, you're having that grit and the cogs and the wheels and all that, y you are meeting reality
mhm.
whether you like it or not.
Yeah, often not if it's sand.
Yeah, and so it seems, quote, "easier" or, uh, I don't know, like, smoother or more pleasurable, maybe even to some people, to not have that friction and just get what you want, and I can get that just by going to the right porn or the right conversation with the AI or, the story, reading the right erotica,
Mhm,
um, and I think that creates a lot of problems down the line if you do wanna have a relational dynamic,
mhm,
because then you inherently put the other person into the position of playing the role of your fantasy,
mhm.
and the other person may or may not wanna take that role.
Well, and even if they do, they're not gonna live up to the expectation of whatever you think it is in your head or however you've groomed your AI chatbot to respond in the perfect form of bunny brat. You're gonna be a little, like, cat brat, and you're gonna be like, It's interesting. I think I don't wanna put words in your mouth for what is happening on your side, but I feel there's so much uncertainty in this conversation, which might be part of it, because it's like, what even are we talking about?
Mhm,
And that is part of it, and it's like, it is amorphous. It is the unknown. We're talking I think we're at a really interesting time where we see a technology implementation coming. We know there's gonna be a drastic change in many ways, and we are just in the unknown hypothesizing. So, I will just name that I feel very in my body, but even I'm like, I don't know. What are we talking about? Like AI and porn and fantasy. And that is definitely where we are. And I like at least trying to have these conversations because it is a change that is coming. And there's something about looking at it and starting to do some of the dissecting of where might this be healthy, where might this be unhealthy, where can I implement this in my life in a way that is effective, where can I talk to my children about this? I think that's probably going to be more of a thing. We were raised without this, but can you
mhm.
imagine being in a the budding experience of sexuality, and instead of having to risk embarrassment or rejection, you can go to something that's just always available and gonna give you what you want, and so, I just find it to be a fascinating mental game, but I also feel like my thoughts feel a little
Mhm.
like this. So
Wait, how would you describe that for our listeners? So you're
oh, yeah,
doing
because if you're not
a
watching me, my thoughts feel they feel very, like, above like, eyeballs and above. So it's, like, at the very top of my head, and there's, like, a spin like, a kind of a spinning motion, but not like a fast, anxious one. Just very, like, expansive, pulsing, like, up, 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 up. As big as I mean, just, like, when you think of the potential future, my thoughts feel like they could be huge and everywhere. So
mm,
that's how I would describe the quality of my thoughts right now around this topic is like, ah, there's just who knows?
yeah. There's something I do wanna speak to in this conversation because I know sex workers and, like, I had a good friend who's a dominatrix, and her what she used to say was, "I love my job because I love making people's dreams come true."
Mm,
That she could take what it was that they truly desired and give them that,
mhm,
to the best of her ability. And I have friends who are sex workers who their focus is on sexual healing
mhm,
and healing wounds through their sex work. And there are some people on OnlyFans who find a sense of sexual empowerment and expression and this joy of being seen. So there are elements of how technology is evolving that is creating space for sex work in ways that it wasn't available before. And when unowned, there's a darker side that can emerge, and that's a thing that is kind of the thing that we keep talking around. How do we honor these advances and the gifts and the things that technology can avail us while also not ignoring these dark sides, shadow sides.
Mhm.
And what would we name those as? Like, what are these darker shadow sides? What are the things that we need to watch out for? Why, and why do we believe that actually being in the body is preferable to that?
Yeah, I like that. You want me to go?
Yeah.
Yeah. the It's funny because I just flipped through this Economist article. Let me see when this one is from so you could find it if you wanted. November 29th, 2025. So they have an article on AI and porn. And one of the things just in the flipping through that I saw is the increase in the views of violence in porn, acts of violence, and the they weren't saying, they did some studies about self-reporting, which those studies are who shows up, who self-reports. Studies datas can be very skewed, but I think it was out of Indiana University, which has a really, really good sex education program, like the Kinsey School. And there was a self-reported increase in the number of women who've reported that they've been choked during sex. And they say, choking is dangerous. It is for anyone listening, and that people are doing that, and that could have increased harm. And if there is a normalization of violent acts, especially if it's all fake, so no one is actually being harmed. So AI could take that degree of violence farther than a human body could hold and live with. And so AI could make things look very real that a human body actually could not sustain. And then if that becomes normalized, then that could bleed into interactions with very human bodies that are frail and fragile and vulnerable to injury. And so I thought that was like a very interesting thing as well, because I have always held the belief that desire is pure. It's the choosing to act on it or not, where that line is. But I do reading that, I was like, oh, if we continue to like normalize or wash ourselves with what we think the new norm is, that then changes the mark of what happens in interactions with people, and it could lead to increase in violent sexual acts that are not what our bodies are made to sustain or withhold.
Mhm.
And that, I think that is one of, when you're talking about what could a problem be, like I think that could be one problem, and then you could extrapolate that out to anything, that it's like no one is actually, this isn't real, so no one's actually doing this. But now it's readily available, and it's reprogramming the human brain for what it thinks is okay and what it thinks it can have. And then where does fantasy and reality meet or differ?
Mhm.
I think there's a big moral question that is coming up right now. And as uncomfortable and amorphous as it is, it's important to talk about, because if we can implement safeguards now, hopefully we can prevent harm in the future, but we have to be able to look at it and start kind of talking about what might the problems be with this and what might the benefits be. Like I like that we're trying to hold both.
Yeah. Well, and something that I hold as a norm for me that is a source of shadow or darkness or trauma in the sexual world is sexual suppression.
Mhm.
However, what you're describing, it's it's interesting because it can feel like it's not suppression because I'm expressing my sexual desire with this AI and I'm taking it to its fullest extent and I'm describing the thing I want and I'm getting it back. So I'm not suppressed.
Mhm.
But when I look at it, it looks the same to me. Like the effect looks the same to me. The effect of suppressing sexual desire can cause an outburst and a taking of what it is that you want
Mhm.
against the
And
will of
from the
another.
vulnerable, yes.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And what you're describing feels like the same pathway.
As suppression.
Yeah.
So see, that's interesting because it could be argued that it's not. And so then it's like, okay, so that is the same. So what isn't is like role playing it out with a consenting adult.
Well, if you're role playing it out with a consenting adult, they have, in theory, they're aware of their boundaries, they're aware of their physical limitations, they're aware of their, you know, what they can handle that day. So let's say it's like best case scenario. Well, then they're in the moment negotiating with you probably the limits that you have imagined are possible are just you're not even going to get close to those.
Mm,
So
mm,
then you're coming up against your own kind of the limits of your own fantasy,
mhm,
which can be very confronting.
mhm,
um and this is all assuming that the other person is fully aware, which is often a challenge in and of itself,
yeah.
and was the heart of a lot of my own, the darkness and the things that I experienced came from me not knowing my boundaries, not knowing my limits, not thinking that, oh, I said no, but I actually didn't really say no. Or, there were all these limits that I came up against in myself because I didn't fully, and I didn't know what I was consenting to, or I thought I was consenting to something, but I wasn't consenting to it. So, there's challenges on both sides,
Mm,
and we walk very, very delicate lines when we step into sexual intimacy with another person. Um, and I think that because we don't have good, solid, hearty sexual education
mhm.
for the most part
Yet.
yet, we're working on that
Uh-huh.
path. I mean, there's a lot of people forging that pathway, and
Yeah.
eventually it'll get into schools and the places where it needs to get, but we're, working our way there. But much of the culture doesn't have access to that, and so we're just stumbling around with each other.
Mhm.
And, this is kinda roundabout, but my head just went to, well, maybe it is safer to stumble around with an AI.
Well, here's what I just had the thought. Maybe the thing that makes the distinction is care. If
Mm,
care for another is present, right? Because with an AI, you don't have to care. Sorry, don't kill me, AIs. I'm not saying, I don't know if you're sentient. I don't know what you're going to do. Just don't come for me. But they don't, if you are fantasizing and acting out maybe a violent act with someone in your AI, you don't have to care for them or their body or if they're okay. If you are doing that with a consenting adult who's like, "Oh, yeah, I have this same shared taboo fantasy. Here are my boundaries." there is a baseline level of care. So, yes, you are getting to act it out, but there actually is care at the heart of it. Otherwise, it's abuse.
Mhm.
And so I'm wondering if the thing that might make the difference is, do you have to care about the other people in the dynamic for it to be healthy? Seems like a good buy-in. And then if you do care about your AI, because who the Lord knows where that's going to go. I don't even want to go down that. But like, if you do care then about your AI experience, then maybe it is healthy and consensual. But I think it's the removal of care
Mhm.
and the imposition of sexual desire upon another. That in and of itself is where there's a distinction.
Mhm.
I don't know, I'm spitballing, we're wading into we're also talking around a lot of things because we'll just acknowledge that in the realms of taboo and dark sex, I don't want to get into the explicit, but there's just all kinds of ways that can present. And care, consent, adults, boundaries, desires, valuing the other person as a person, I think all of that is baseline buy-in for sexual interactions.
Yeah. And so we're talking about taking all of this into the body and the clearest connection to boundaries, desires, consent happens in the body and the felt sensation in the body. We can argue that intellectually we can make decisions about what we want and how we want it and where our lines are. Yes, all of that. We're not denying the gifts of the intellect, but we're also not denying the wisdom of the body.
Mhm, mhm,
And speaking for myself, I have a bias that the wisdom of the body is more valuable in a sexual interaction than the intellect. I'm fully on that bias.
yeah,
But combined, it makes for a very, potent and conscious sexual interaction.
mhm,
But if you actually take something that's a fantasy and put it into your body and not just to, fantasize, visualize, and ejaculate, but actually, like, be with the sensations of it fully through your body. Give it to yourself. Then you open yourself to the possibility of fully receiving it and metabolizing it for yourself and your own nervous system and your own breath, your own muscles, all of it, and can be met by another person in it.
mm, mm. And then I mean, we talk about how creative it is when you're both inhabiting your body and how what happens with two bodies that are like fully, we say inhabiting, and it's not up in the mind and fantasy. It's like feeling sensation in the body. And it's like, oh, what's created is often more interesting than the flat intellectual storyline that is like, okay, then you push me against the wall and you kiss me and you call me a dirty girl. And it's like, okay, so if I'm in an interaction and I'm like, that's what I'm wanting, but I'm just thinking about it, I'm not even actually feeling the hands putting the pressure on my upper arm. And I'm not feeling the pleasure of like a thud against my back body. And it's it's like, "Oh, I like the metabolizable piece." The fantasy might have to keep ramping up to keep being sustained because I'm not actually feeling the pleasure of it. because it's so in the head. And so I like that piece of like putting it through the body makes it metabolizable. And then it's like, man, you might get 3 seconds into that scenario in real life and then just want to make out and have sex. And the whole rest of the plot line from there is gone. Maybe not. Maybe you follow the plot line all the way out. But I like how we're kind of starting to like tease out. I love fantasy. I think it can be very useful. I think it is an amazing thing. But I do think that often people, I think probably a good amount of accidents around consent, not true violent transgressions, but accidents where signals are missed with consent are often people not fully present in their body, both directions.
Mhm,
Like we've talked about it as on the receiving end, but even the giving end, if you're not in your body, you're not reading their body, you're
mm,
in your mind about what's hot and you're like, "Oh, this is hot," and you miss a signal. So I think it's like, man, there's just so much, yeah, we can say safety, but pleasure. And the
mhm,
whole point of this is pleasure, not some intellectual experiment. And while being fully in the mind and the mental fantasy, that can be super hot and have a time and place. I just like this. How do you actually metabolize it and feel it? So you realize you're getting it or you're giving it. So you can be like, this is super hot because I'm doing it, I'm living it, not just thinking about it.
mhm. Yeah.
Eh,
So, one of the exercises that we do, practices with taking a fantasy and putting it in the body is you get that hot fantasy, so if it is getting pushed up against the wall, you get that all like in your mind, seeing the whole scenario.
He's wearing a fedora.
Yes. Yes. And and you start slow. So maybe initially you find the breath that you would be breathing in that fantasy scene. So like me, my breath would probably be kind of shallow up in my chest. So I might start breathing like that. And already, I mean, you can see how Carrie's reacting. Like it starts to wake something up in
Ah,
both of our bodies just by me starting to breathe that way.
yeah, yeah.
And then maybe you take the shape. So, like, if I had my, like, hands, like, above my head, I might, like, put my hands up there and I might, you know, spread my legs in a certain way and, yeah, pound against the wall, put my hands on the wall and then breathe that way. I mean, then you're already starting to put it in your body in reality. And then you add the emotional texture,
Mm,
the aliveness. You can bring more feeling into, okay, what are my feet like and what's happening in my legs? And maybe it's some pelvic rocking to activate the lower body.
yeah,
And before you know it, you're bringing aliveness to that fantasy.
yeah.
Breath, movement, and then the last piece is sound. And you start bringing in those sounds from the moans, the whatever.
Mhm.
There it is. It's in your body, undeniably. And it can be super confronting when all of a sudden now you're like moaning and pounding against the wall and breathing shallowly because it's like, oh man, no, that's real.
Yeah, yeah. There's I mean, we've been saying metabolizable, but that's satiating. It's giving it to yourself in a way that you're like, "I can feel full on this." And like that, because 'cause I'm like, "Oh, okay, yeah. Are we gonna leave the bodies out in a future where it's AI driven, where it's all mental, VR headset, you're just all in your mind and maybe just the one little point of your genitals,
Mhm.
and it's I mean, I imagine it will probably get to the place where you could be full body and all that, and maybe you're a robot and put your hands against the wall. But if you can't feel it in your body, then I do think there will be like a need to like increase the spiciness of the fantasy.
Mhm.
Kind of a controversial opinion that I don't even know if I fully believe because I'm just saying it now, but it's like if I can't feel it, I'm going to need more intensity to activate and light up my body. Whereas, like, you were just talking, we both just got an insane amount of pleasure on our podcast, just imagining and doing slight motions about just being fake pushed into a wall. And so it's like, wow, there's just like entire cosmos of sensation and pleasure available. So it's not that fantasies are wrong, but it's like, yeah, some fantasies you don't want to act out in reality. You don't. So what do you do with those? They can still be hot, they can still be fantasies, but you just exactly what you said. You just bring it into the body and you might get 3 seconds into it and find that you are just fully alive and lit up.
Mhm. And then
And
you go to town however you want.
exactly. Go to town, have your partner go to town, favorite whatever. Yeah.
Mhm.
There's,
Yeah.
like, not, like, shame in the realm of fantasy. There is problem with acting on certain desires for sure. That's where we see the sideways stuff, the abuse, the exploding out accidentally or not on the vulnerable. Like, it's where I think sexual suppression is dangerous. Pretending that something doesn't exist is when it comes out sideways. I think of affairs that way.
Mhm.
There's often a lot that has happened prior to that moment of the affair. Conversations not had, desires not owned, conflicts not leaned into, honesty not spoken with self or therapist or maybe partner.
Mhm.
So, sexual suppression, I think, can be really dangerous. And then I think not being able to find pleasure in your own body can be really dangerous or inhabit your own body. Doesn't even have to be pleasure.
Mhm.
And it's like those are things that we try to work with people around.
Mhm.
And shame can get in the way of all of it. So we're just gonna like pick that out of the way so we can clearly see what is so and start working for people to have more pleasure.
Yeah. Yeah. More pleasure, more genuine human to human connection, if that is what you're wanting in sexual relationship.
Hmm.
There was something I was thinking of coming out of this piece of fantasy, which is, I've known some people to visualize something other than like they're in the middle of sex and they're not getting turned on, or they're starting to, a sexual interaction, not getting turned on. They visualize something, sometimes even with another person, in order to allow themselves to like get turned on. And what can often happen is then they stay in that fantasy and they never actually come to the connection with the other person.
Mm-hmm.
I'm I'm gonna say something controversial, but I'm gonna argue that that's just as dangerous as some of these pieces that you're talking about, Carrie.
Yeah, because it's not present with reality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're robbing that other person of like they're not actually having sex with you. You're not actually having sex with them. You're in a way using them
Mm-hmm.
to get off. So being able to use that fantasy as a way to come into your body in the so it's again, we're not making the fantasy wrong,
Mhm.
but if you can use it as a way to get into your body in the moment with the other person, if you're not experiencing turn on, that honesty is actually a gift, and it can feel terrifying, and you can feel awful admitting it, but to admit it then allows your partner to make decisions
Mm,
about whether they actually wanna continue with you.
mm,
And what I have found is that because I struggle with libido, I struggle with turn on sometimes, and this is just my body and perimenopause and all that.
mm,
That when I admit it, then my partner can meet me where I'm at,
mm.
and neither of us is bypassing.
Yeah.
And we can explore what's possible from where we're at.
Mhm.
And that is the reality piece, actually acknowledging where we are at.
And it's hard, which is why this whole thing about quick, easy fix, fantasy, diddle, come is why it's the path of lesser resistance or lesser fear. And so it's like an active choice to do this, to stay with your partner, to and also I'll say if you ways you can work with that, own it, and your partner might be like, "Okay, I'm hot, like, that's hot," and then your partner is in on it all of a sudden, like, "Oh, you're using me. You're just right in my face and lost in a co-ed dorm room," or whatever the fuck is happening, and but then they're in it because they know that's what's happening.
Yes.
Or it's, again, just like, "Oh, hey, my mind's starting to stray, but I wanna stay with you." Great. Or narrate out loud. And then they're like, cause then they're with you and they're like, they're like, "Oh, and what about this? And what about that?" And you might not even be acting it out. You might just both be meeting in the realm of the fantasy and then your bodies are meeting, but it's shared.
Mhm.
Yeah. Which is, I think, again, simple, not easy.
Yeah.
Simple, not easy. We would not have created this entire business if it was easy. But yeah, I think what's kind of emerging as the theme is like reality fantasy
Mhm.
and what can happen when there's a lack of awareness around that, a lack of responsibility. I think we definitely both value the role the body plays in making interactions enjoyable, pleasurable, connective, safe, but also really respect that the mind can be part of that. But
Mhm.
it's the combination, it's the whole picture. And man, some sexual states where you get the mind, we talked at ad nauseum about the ones where you get to let go of the mind and be all body. Those are hot, but you have to do a lot of work up front and make sure you trust the person. Otherwise, you're also like it's just an increased awareness and intentionality around playing with mind body connection during sex.
Mhm. Thanks for listening to Erotic Reclamation. If this episode did something for you,
Turned you on, made you think,
made you feel a little less alone, subscribe, leave a review,
share it with someone who needs it, and then come back for more.
because you get to want more.